Immigration enforcement can decrease the likelihood of a terrorist attack in the U.S. It's just one of many reasons it makes sense to know who's coming into the country and why. But for 4 years, the U.S. was flying blind. How vigilant should Americans be stateside, and whose job is it to make sure terror cells do not emerge or activate here? We're joined by former Secretary of Homeland Security Chad Wolf and former undercover CIA officer and Congressman Will Hurd. Welcome to you both, gentlemen. Mr. Secretary, what should Americans expect in the days and weeks to come? What are DHS and the Bureau looking for stateside in terms of something nefarious happening here?
Well, sure. Look, the Department of Homeland Security, along with FBI and the intelligence agencies, are looking for any credible threats, any credible information that says something is going to occur here in the homeland. Absent that, and DHS has just issued an advisory today saying there is no credible information or threat, but we need to be aware that Iran can obviously strike back.
Former senior officer with the DNI and an executive director at Flashpoint. So, Courtney, tell us about your reporting on these threats to the U.S. homeland.
Yeah, so we've learned, according to our colleagues Carol Lee and Monica Alba and I, our sources, telling us that recently Iran sent a message directly to President Donald Trump, warning him that if he were to engage in U.S. military strikes against Iranian nuclear facilities, that Iran has a number of sleeper cells here in the United States, and they could unleash some sort of a terror attack here domestically. Now, this message came through an intermediary during the G7 meeting in Canada. Chris, you'll recall that President Trump left that meeting early, saying that he needed to come back to D.C. to deal with the ongoing tensions between Israel and Iran.
President Trump and his national security team are set to meet this afternoon and discuss what's next as world leaders urge Iran to come to the negotiating table and avoid all-out war. In a stealth, historic, complex, and highly choreographed military strike, B-2 bombers struck the Fordo nuclear site as Tomahawk missiles fired from U.S. submarines hit two other facilities, Isfahan and Natanz. Right now, you're looking at the president and his team in the Situation Room as Operation Midnight Hammer was executed. And thanks for joining us. I'm Jan Jeffcoat. It is Monday, June 23rd. This morning, the U.S. and Israel on high alert after President Trump followed through on his promise Iran needed to come to the negotiating table over its nuclear program or face the consequences.
Hours this morning. We're also seeing reports that Iran sent a message to President Trump during the G7 summit, so several days ago, threatening to activate sleeper cells in the U.S. to launch terror attacks if he ordered those strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities. Of course, we know that happened. At the same time, we are seeing a concerning alliance brewing. Russia's former president says multiple countries are ready to provide Iran with nuclear warheads. A former Russian president posted on social media talking about the enrichment of nuclear material, saying in part, quote, "Now we can say it outright. The future production of nuclear weapons will continue." He goes on to say the number of countries are ready to directly supply Iran with their nuclear warheads.
Hi, Kelly. Well, these sleeper cells have long been the worry of the intelligence community. And by definition, sleeper cells, for those who don't know, are spies or terrorists who are in our country or Western countries and inactive until they're essentially ordered to act. And experts that we've talked to said that should the U.S. join these strikes against Iran, they may try to activate these sleeper cells in the U.S. and the West. A recent Department of Homeland Security threat assessment concurs. It says, "We expect Iran to remain the primary sponsor of terrorism and continue its efforts to advance plots against individuals, including current and former U.S. officials in the United States."
I'm national correspondent Kayla Gaskins in Washington. The Department of Homeland Security warning of a heightened threat environment following the United States strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities. The U.S. remains on high alert following the weekend strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities. NBC News reporting Iran warned President Trump before the strikes that they would activate sleeper terror cells in the United States if the U.S. dropped bombs on their nuclear sites.
sleeper cells carrying out acts of terrorism here in the United States. The administration is being vigilant. Law enforcement across the country is being vigilant. But it is a real danger because we've had 4 years of open borders.
Border Patrol statistics reportedly show an increasing number of Iranians attempting to enter the U.S. illegally via the southern border.
The fact is, nobody, if they're speaking honestly from U.S. intelligence or law enforcement, can tell you as a matter of fact how badly we've been infiltrated here in the United States.
The U.S. remains on high alert following the weekend strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities. NBC News reporting Iran warned President Trump before the strikes that they would activate sleeper terror cells in the United States if the U.S. dropped bombs on their nuclear sites.
Sleeper cells carrying out acts of terrorism here in the United States. The administration is being vigilant. Law enforcement across the country is being vigilant. But it is a real danger because we've had 4 years of open borders.
Border Patrol statistics reportedly show an increasing number of Iranians attempting to enter the U.S. illegally via the southern border.
The fact is, nobody, if they're speaking honestly from U.S. intelligence or law enforcement, can tell you as a matter of fact how badly we've been infiltrated here in the United States.